Hey y'all, Matt Smith back here with you. SEC previews continue. The South Carolina Gamecocks are up today. We're talking about first-year head coach Shane Beamer. Takes the job after a stint at Oklahoma as a position coach. Obviously a very famous last name in the sport. The son of Frank Beamer. Has a pretty good variety in his background, not just working with his dad. Has spent time, of course, with Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma the past few years. Worked for Kirby Smart at Georgia. Steve Spurrier at South Carolina. Of course, worked for his dad. So he takes over a program that's been kind of middling the past few years. Had a big rise in 2017 under Will Muschamp, but that could not be sustained. They kind of slipped back from 18 to 19 to 20, and it bottomed out last year at 2-8 in the COVID year. Muschamp was gone prior to the end of the season. And they went with Beamer, a young, energetic guy, hoping to resurrect this program and bring it back to its kind of more recent glory days, I guess. There's no true glory days maybe in the history of South Carolina football. But from 2011 to 2013, when they won 11 games 3 years in a row, had won the East the year before. So that's the goal for the next couple of years, is to get this program to elevate back up to the Georgia-Florida level and compete for division titles. Tough road, especially with Clemson being hot as well over the past decade. So we'll see what the future brings, but we're going to focus on 2021 today and what that holds for the Gamecocks. As far as his staff hires, Beamer brought in Marcus Satterfield, who was the OC for a bit with Matt Rule at Temple, also spent time at Baylor, was a failed head coach at Tennessee Tech, but he's not the head coach here, just a coordinator, just worried about the offense. So I think a pretty good hire there. Also went pretty young with his defensive hire, Clayton White, spent some time at Western Kentucky as the DC there. So again, a young, energetic staff trying to rejuvenate this program. Position groups, looking at the quarterback, Luke Doty is going to be the number one guy heading into camp, at least here in August. He started the last couple games after Colin Hill was injured, the Colorado State transfer, who was there as a stopgap last year. It's Doty's team for now. Whether he can sustain it even throughout this year or even into 2022, that remains to be seen. Not a ton to glean from last season's two starts. They were kind of checked out at that point. Numbers were okay, but nothing special. So Doty's got a lot of work to do to prove that he is the guy for the future there in Columbia. They did hit the portal going up to St. Francis in Pennsylvania, small little Catholic school up there. And they brought in a guy named Jason Brown to compete with Doty. I don't know if it's going to be a true competition. It was probably more of a depth add coming from a small Northeastern Conference program like St. Francis. But he'll be in the mix and is probably going to be the guy if Doty gets hurt or struggles. Running game, I think this is where this team can have some success. Kevin Harris was the All-SEC running back last year, almost 1,200 yards in a shortened season. That's pretty darn good for a young player like that. They also have Marshawn Lloyd as a redshirt freshman now. Big recruit, missed last season with a preseason injury. That's a heck of a 1-2 punch there, I think, with Lloyd and Harris. And they're going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to be physical. This offensive line, numbers not great last year, but a ton of experience. 5 upperclassmen starters. So it's kind of that quandary where we got a lot of experience, but they haven't really proven it. Is this good or bad? Do we want some young guys to come in and take over for them? But I think overall that running game is going to be what they lean on in this year. Shane Beamer spent media days kind of recruiting, tight ends. They have a good one in Nick Muse. They want to build that position out for the future. I think it's maybe an arbitrage opportunity in terms of what groups are being leveraged in the SEC, going to more spread offenses, 3-4 wide. They may want to go old school here, get some 12 personnel with 2 tight ends. They'll try to do that this year and probably in the future as well, but they do have at least one good one in Nick Muse. The receiving core, Takarian Joyner is an interesting guy. He's probably going to be your number one prospect. They also at the portal went back to St. Francis, not getting just the quarterback Jason Brown, but also E.J. Jenkins. He's kind of a hybrid wide receiver tight end, about 6'7", should be a top red zone target, should the Gamecock actually get to the red zone enough times to make him useful this year. But that's kind of your 1-2 punch. Again, they have Muse. So the passing game, definitely more concerns, though, than the running game. And flipping over to defense, probably the strength of this team is going to be the defensive line. You got an emerging star in Kingsley and Agbare, who had an incredible season last year. Not a super high pedigree top recruit guy, but really flashed and was very productive last year, and high hopes for this season as well. He's joined by some guys with more high pedigree, but haven't really proven as much on the field. Zach Pickens, Jordan Birch, some top recruits from recent years. So that defensive line, I think, is going to be pretty solid. Back 7, they're going to probably run a 4-2-5 under Clayton White, so just looking for 2 linebackers, but a huge loss with Ernest Jones gone. He was a 3rd-round draft pick of the Rams. And also in the secondary as well, lost their 2 top corners. J.C. Horn was a top 10 pick. in the draft, so he's gone. He's going to Carolina just up the road. Israel Mugamu also gone. He had the memorable pick 6 against Georgia in that big upset down there 2 years ago. So both corners gone. Their top linebacker gone. A lot of holes to replace there. A couple veterans. R.J. Roderick at safety. He's played a good bit of football there. But both those groups are kind of starting over. So if you're looking for an area where this team's probably going to struggle, it's on the back end of that defense. Turning to the schedule, as you can see scrolling across the screen, it's tough. It always is for South Carolina, having to play A&M as the rotating game, obviously having Clemson every year outside of last year. But the good thing is they don't have that second really tough non-conference game. They've played North Carolina in the past. They played NC State in the past. They only have one Power 5 non-conference game this year, and of course that's Clemson. Potential tricky game there in week 2, though, going to East Carolina. I kind of like the Pirates. They haven't done much the last couple of years, but it's year 3 now for their head coach, Mike Houston. I think that's a dangerous game. They've upset a number of Power 5 teams in the past there, particularly in Greenville. So a tricky game for them, but one they definitely don't want to lose, because that schedule gets tough very quickly. The next week they head to Georgia, Kentucky coming up, A&M in October, of course Florida and Clemson later in the year. So if they do have any hopes of getting to a bowl game or even getting to 5 wins, they got to take care of business there in Greenville in week 2. So big game there. Again, the rotating game along with A&M, that's Auburn this year. Auburn played in Columbia last year as one of the added 9th and 10th games last year. Big upset for South Carolina. Could not build off of that, but they'll come later in the season. And a very funny quirk for South Carolina. Their last 3 games are all against the Tigers. They go to Missouri, and then they come home to play Auburn and Clemson, all 3 Tigers. So just a kind of an interesting quirk there. But again, pretty tough slate. Auburn, not too bad as them as the rotating game. Maybe you'd prefer to have Arkansas or Mississippi State there, but no Alabama, no LSU, no Ole Miss. So overall, not so bad, given you're locked into Texas A&M and Clemson every year. Prediction time, I'm going 5-7. I think that's the bar for a really good year for Beamer. I don't think you're really angry about 4-8. But 5-7 means you probably took care of business in your 3 non-con games that aren't Clemson, beat Vanderbilt, who obviously should beat, and stole one elsewhere. Maybe it's at Tennessee, and the one I'm calling for is a second straight year where they knock off Auburn. I think that's late in the season. It's November 20th. This team should be more up to speed by then. It's an Auburn team who I actually kind of like to be better early rather than later. I think the experience of Bo Nix will help them out. I think they're kind of going to be like South Carolina and go back to more of a ground and pound approach this year. So that could actually be a pretty fun game if you like old school man ball in terms of just beating each other up to the line of scrimmage with maybe the 2 best backs in the league in Tank Bigsby for Auburn and Kevin Harris for South Carolina. So 5-7 for the Gamecocks. Pretty good year 1, I would say, for Beamer. No bowl game, barring some severe limitation of the number of bowl eligible teams this year where they could sneak in at 5-7. But I think they'll be home for the holidays. But again, that's fine for year 1 for Beamer. They're at least another year or 2 away from moving up into that top tier of the SEC East. So that's the Gamecocks for you. Let me know your thoughts below in the comments. Please reach out to me on Twitter anytime, of course, at MattSmithCFB. Written preview for the Gamecocks is up at southernpigskin.com. And we're getting close, guys. Can't wait to get this season rolling here pretty soon. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to y'all soon.